afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, we will be joined by sports business reporter Kevin Kleps from Crain's Cleveland Business to talk a little bit about the Bally Sports App. Peter Carfagna, visiting sports law professor at Harvard Law, will join us to talk about the NCAA losing that Supreme Court decision. But we begin by talking Browns. And whenever we talk Browns, we love to be talking with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. Dan, you have written about Joe Woods' defense having all the pieces and being ready to go. Take us through the thought process and what you are thinking with Joe Woods.
Well, this is a big year for Joe Woods in this defense that he wants to implement. He finally has the safeties he wants. He finally has the secondary he wants. This is a guy that ran a lot of dime when he was the defensive coordinator with Denver. So he's got an opportunity to create a pass rush with four and cover with everybody else. He's got all sorts of versatility. He didn't want to admit it to us necessarily. He didn't come out and say it, but those injuries last year really kind of hampered what he wanted to do. And he wasn't really wanting to make excuses when we talked to him at the end of minicamp, but he sort of said it without saying it. So I think he's excited for this year, and I think Browns fans should be excited for this year defensively.
The other thing that became abundantly clear, the versatility was by design so they can go matchup dependent on who they're playing.
Yeah, exactly. And they can, if they want to go heavy on safeties, they can go heavy on safeties. If they want to play, nickel a bunch, they can do that. They can play a bunch of linebackers if they want. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, if he kind of hits the ground running, he gives them a lot of options. So they can make life really difficult for quarterbacks because, you just don't know what you're going to see. Even play to play, series to series, game to game. It's going to be really hard to kind of lock down, I think, what this defense is.
When you look at the depth, that's a pretty significant upgrade. Is there one level of the defense that you think is more deep, if you will, that has more depth than the other?
Probably defensive line. I just think there's a lot of guys there who can be really effective. You look at the interior of the line, you've added a bunch of bodies. You lost Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi, so you lost two starters from last year, but I think you've replaced them. And I think you have a lot of nice, young, intriguing options behind the two guys that might end up starting there. Jadeveon Clowney on the edge with Takk McKinley, Myles Garrett on one side. You've got some other kind of intriguing young guys too, and a guy like a Porter Gustin or a Joe Jackson, some guys that could maybe develop. So I think the defensive line is really where the depth lies in this group.
So you mentioned that. Jason Lockenfor from CBSSports.com came up with a player on each team whose make or break and who their fate could determine their team's fate. For the Browns, it was Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. And he might be right because you need that second pass rusher. And even though I just touted all that depth, it does kind of start with Clowney being able to play and play at a high level because we just haven't seen it from Takk McKinley. Now, I like Takk McKinley in the role he's in. Back when he was signed as maybe the guy that was going to be starting, I wasn't real excited about it. So if we get into a situation where Jadeveon Clowney's hurt or he's not out on the field for whatever reason and Takk McKinley's the guy who has to start all of a sudden, now I don't love that combination as much. So, yeah, Clowney is really important to what they want to do on this pass rush because like I mentioned off the top, I do think they want to get pressure with force, sort of like what Joe Woods saw them do in San Francisco when he was coaching the DBs and what he was able to do in Denver when he was the defensive coordinator.
The other thing is Jason Lockenfor did that for each of the other teams in the division. Bengals, Joe Burrow. Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger. And the Ravens, he went with their center, Bradley Bozeman. I guess I get it, but those are very interesting choices.
That's digging really deep on the Ravens. Center is an important position. I think Browns fans understand that. They've had a good one the last few years, but I don't think centers necessarily make or break winning Super Bowl. So that's an interesting one. I think I agree with him on Ben Roethlisberger. He's got to look more like the Ben that we saw in the first half of the season than the guy that kind of fell apart at the end. I don't know if he'll ever be the Ben that we saw who was leading the league in passing yardage and all of that back in the day. But he's got to be better than he was at the end of the season. Joe Burrow, an interesting choice too. I love all the weapons in Cincinnati. They have so many receivers. Joe Mixon's a really good back if they can protect him. I would actually say It's more the Bengals offensive line, not Joe Burrow. I think we know what Joe Burrow can do, and he can play point guard and distribute the football. I think it's the protection in front of him that's going to be more important for the Bengals.
Yeah, the other point, Jason Lockenfor is a huge Ravens fan, so that's something to keep an eye on. If he's saying that they need a center, it's probably something for the Browns fans to keep an eye on. All right, Bleacher Report came up with the biggest standout of every NFL team this offseason. So the biggest guy in the area before they get to training camp. For the Browns, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Again, another interesting pick here. I don't know if he's the guy that I would have picked, and it's not because he looked bad or anything in camp. It's just, I thought Greg Newsome looked really good in what we saw with him, and he ended a mini camp with an interception in the red zone off Baker Mayfield, and I think he's got a real shot to carry that momentum into training camp and beat out Greedy Williams for that job. So, look, Owusu-Koramoah was fine. We were only out there for a couple of practices and OTAs and 3 mini camp practices. We couldn't see a ton. So that's an interesting choice. I maybe would have gone with a guy like Newsome, but look, if they're saying Owusu-Koramoah stood out like that, that's a good thing for the Browns.
Okay, I know it's way too early and training camp starts in about 6 weeks and we just finished mandatory mini camp, but we're going to turn our attention to the battles you can't wait to see for the upcoming training camp, which starts end of July.
So I mentioned one of them, it's defensive tackle. I mentioned that group a little earlier, and I think that's going to be a really interesting battle. Malik Jackson, I think you can write him in as a starter. I think he's a guy that can give you what Sheldon Richardson gave you and maybe more, especially now that he's healthy. What's really interesting is Tommy Togiai. What's he going to do? I think, just getting eyes on him in minicamp and seeing him move and seeing how athletic he was. You don't get to see these guys go up against offensive linemen. You don't get to see one-on-ones. You don't get to see contact. They aren't allowed to do that in the spring. But I think Togiai is going to handle that stuff just fine. We saw how he did at Ohio State. And I think he's going to push for playing time in that defensive tackle room. And then the other one, we all know about the cornerback battle, but one of the under-the-radar ones is maybe that third receiver who's going to step in. I feel like we talk about this every year. Rashard Higgins, obviously in that mix, but Donovan Peoples-Jones was really impressive, I thought, when we saw him. They love Kadero Hodge. He won that job last year out of training camp before he got hurt in the Dallas game. So I think that's going to be a really good battle for that number 3 receiver job. And Anthony Schwartz is in the mix now too.
Again, you touched on the cornerback battle, and that's going to be opposite Denzel Ward. How legitimate of a chance do you think Greg Newsome has? And is it dependent on Greedy Williams? He's still banged up on him potentially being limited through training camp.
I mean, that's a huge piece of it. If Greedy can't get out there and play and show what he can do, then that's going to be a big advantage for Greg Newsome. And I think Newsome is going to have the ability to really shine in training camp. He's got, all of those athletic tools. He moves really well. I think he's going to make plays that are, whatever the fans look like in attendance at training camp, they're going to ooh and ah at what they see him do. I think he's got that ability. He'll be able to shine in preseason games. I think it'll come down to, like you mentioned, Greedy's health. And it may come down to, do you want to throw a rookie out there against Kansas City week 1 and just throw him into the fire like that? Or do you want to bring him along slowly? But I really do believe Greg Newsome can win that job.
The flip side of it is his athletic ability. You can see that.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is I think they feel like they can play him inside. They kind of experimented with it a little bit this spring. Now, they signed Troy Hill to be their nickel, and I think that's going to be Troy Hill's job regardless. But the idea of maybe being able to move Greg Newsome inside so you could have Greedy and Denzel on the outside in certain situations is really interesting. He's got the ability, I think, the athletic ability to do it. He just didn't do it a lot at Northwestern. So I think it's something the Browns will experiment with.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, the top GMs in football were ranked by Matt Miller of ESPN. We'll take a look at that when Sports4CLE returns. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football with Dan Labbe from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, and Dan, Matt Miller from ESPN ranked the top 10 general managers in the NFL. Number 1, Kevin Colbert from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 2, Chris Ballard, Indianapolis Colts. 3, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott from the Buffalo Bills. Andrew Berry did not make the top 10. Surprised by that?
A little bit. There's been a lot of hype around Andrew Berry. I think it's more just a sample size. We've seen, now 2 very good off seasons from him. We saw the Browns win 11 games last year, and a lot of that was a combination of what he did and John Dorsey did, and also going all the way back to Sashi Brown, kind of those 3 GMs combining to build that team. And now Andrew Berry's going to leave his stamp on this team with these last 2 drafts, what he does in free agency, how he's rebuilt this defense. So I think maybe by this time next year, Andrew Berry's on this list easily, probably in the top 5. I'm surprised to see Kevin Colbert number 1. I think he's a really good GM, and the Steelers have this great identity, and they know how to draft, and they know how to build. But I'm a little surprised to see him at the top of the list. The other guys on that list, I think Chris Ballard, again, sort of out of that Kansas City John Dorsey school, one of the best in the business, and Brandon Beane's done an amazing job at Buffalo. And I think that's the conversation that Andrew Berry is going to put himself in if we're having this discussion again next year.
Well, it's kind of interesting because our next point is Pro Football Focus ranked the top 32 contracts in the NFL. And top was Stephon Diggs of the Bills, second Darren Waller of the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, the tight end with a ridiculously good contract. 5th is John Johnson, a guy that Andrew Berry signed as his number 1 target and free agent with the 5th best contract in the NFL. So that's a balancing act there as far as him not being one of the top GMs.
Yeah, I think it just shows you that he's, like I said, he's going to be on this list eventually. And in the list of top 10, he probably deserves to be on it. But the way he's maneuvered this cap, the way he maneuvered this offseason with a weird salary cap and structured these contracts in creative ways, John Johnson is a really good example of that. And again, it's kind of the second year in a row where he's had a free agent target. It's been one of the top guys on the market, and he's gone out and gotten him. Last year it was Jack Conklin. That's worked out great. He's either the best or the second best offensive lineman on this team. It's either him or Joel Bitonio. And then you've got adding John Johnson this year. So I think Andrew Berry's off to about as good a start as you could ask from a GM.
And think about the contract is it's viewed as one of the best in the NFL. More importantly, it addressed what the Browns targeted as a huge need. So not only did they fill a need, they filled it with a responsible contract as well.
Yeah, exactly. They do a really good job of stacking guys. They do a really good job of not putting pressure on draft picks all the time. And then they do a good job of, when they have a target, go get him. And then don't be afraid to draft behind that guy too. I just think we're really getting a good idea of Andrew Berry's team building philosophy. And it's going to pay off, not just this year, but it's going to pay off down the road because he's building a really deep roster.
And the flip side of it is you've got a number of guys that are you're going to want to get paid, and you have a lot of good guys that he's going to want to pay, and you have to feel at least a little bit confident that he's going to be able to maneuver the salary cap to the best that anybody could.
If you have Paul DePodesta and Andrew Berry and a guy like Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah who came here from San Francisco, you've got guys with financial backgrounds. It's pretty crazy. And then Paul DePodesta, the architect of Moneyball in Oakland, these guys are going to know how to manage the salary cap, and they're going to know how to plan this thing out, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. They're not going to be conservative about it. We're not going to see them, take that Oakland A's approach, because obviously the NFL financials are different. They're going to pay guys, but they're also going to be able to structure these contracts to maintain flexibility and continue to make this team better down the road.
All right, so now we're going to take a look. Doug Poundaley has the top 5 remaining free agents for the Browns to target. I'm going to give you 5, 4, and 3 in one fell swoop, and we'll talk about them. Adrian Claiborne, defensive end, was with the Browns. Wide receiver Kenny Stills, defensive tackle Geno Atkins. Are you buying any of those 3, Dan?
I'm not, because, obviously you mentioned Claiborne was with this team last year, and he contributed a little, but you've already addressed that. You added Takk McKinley, you added Jadeveon Clowney. Geno Atkins is a really nice player. I like him, but your defensive tackle room is already so crowded. Sheldon Richardson, you flirted with bringing him back, and that would have been interesting, but I don't know that you're going to go add more to that defensive tackle room. And then at receiver, Kenny Stills, again, we're kind of sitting here talking about how are they going to get guys the football. You've got 2 really great running backs. You've got a bunch of tight ends. You've got a bunch of receivers. How are you going to feed all these guys? You're going to go out now and add a guy like Kenny Stills to the mix. I just don't think any of those guys fit right now. If somebody gets hurt in training camp, absolutely. Take a look if they're still out there. But right now, I don't think any of those guys make sense.
Now, the last 2 are a little more intriguing. Number 2 is Malik Hooker, former Ohio State Buckeye safety, and number 1, cornerback Steven Nelson.
Yeah, Steven Nelson would be an interesting addition. It would maybe be your way of saying, I don't know if we believe in Greedy Williams or Greg Newsome. But, that's a guy you would probably take a look at. And then, as far as the other option, I'm blanking on who it was.
Malik Hooker.
Malik Hooker, yeah. So that's sort of a reclamation project. And you're pretty good in the safety room, so maybe you could bring him in and let him kind of work his way back. Ronnie Harrison's a free agent after this season. So, yeah, if you're bringing him in as sort of a reclamation, a guy who's had trouble with injuries, that would be interesting.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Pro Football Focus continues to reveal their top 50 players in the NFL. Browns have another one as they reveal 31-40. Sports4CLE will tell you who it is when we return. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Pro Football Focus is ranking the top 50 players in the NFL. They reveal 31 to 40 today. 35, Julio Jones. 37, the Browns' Nick Chubb. 38, A.J. Brown from the Titans. 39, Alvin Kamara. So Chubb ranked ahead of him. 40, Josh Allen. And, of course, 41 was the Browns' John Johnson, who they signed. So top 40 for Nick Chubb, 37. What do you make of that?
I'm not surprised he's on this list. I kind of want to see where Derrick Henry ends up on this list. I want to make sure that Nick Chubb isn't too far behind him because I don't think Nick Chubb belongs with too much space between him and Henry. I think they're both very similar backs. They don't run the same way, but they're used the same way. They run the ball a lot. I think Nick Chubb might actually be a better pass catcher than Derrick Henry, to be honest. So I think he gets an edge there, even though I think PFF dinged him a little bit for that. It's impressive to see him ahead of Alvin Kamara. You know, look, I'd like to see Nick Chubb higher on this list. I'd actually like to see A.J. Brown higher on this list. I think he's one of the best receivers in football that nobody really talks about. So I want to see how the rest of this list comes out. But I think when all is said and done, we might say that both those guys back-to-back deserve to be a little bit higher.
And when you think of Nick Chubb, the thing that makes him so unique, runs over people, and then when he gets in the open field, he's got that extra gear for a big guy.
Yeah, it's that explosiveness. I remember the 2 runs he had in Oakland, the first time we really got to see him. And it was unbelievable. He was one-on-one with the safety, and the safety didn't have a chance. He did it against Atlanta that rookie year, too, when he broke off a 92-yarder. We saw it this year a number of times. When he gets through that first level of the defense, and he's got one-on-one matchups, he just leaves people behind. And that screen pass in Pittsburgh was a great example of what he can do catching the football. Now, he had some drops against Kansas City, but that play really brought out the best in him against Pittsburgh. When he caught that screen, he made Minkah Fitzpatrick look foolish on that play and took it for a long touchdown. I think there's more there with Nick Chubb in the screen game.
Yeah, and, you know, the other thing is, and you mentioned Derrick Henry, he's almost as physical of a runner to go with that explosiveness as well.
He really is. I mean, the only difference is Henry's just enormous. And, you know, Nick Chubb is pretty big, but he's no Derrick Henry. I don't think many are. And so I think that's what separates Derrick Henry when you see those highlights, those stiff arms and things like that. But Chubb has a lot of that in his game too. I mean, just go back and watch that run against the Eagles, and he put somebody on their back in that game as well. So he's got a lot of the same abilities that Henry has.
So Bleacher Report came out with one player on each and every NFL team who could disappoint in 2021. And for the Browns, they list tight end Austin Hooper. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, Hooper did not live up to what the Browns brought him in to do last year. They made him, at least at the time, the highest paid tight end in football. And he didn't live up to that. Now, maybe expectations were too high. I think anytime you pluck somebody out of that Atlanta offense, you kind of put up fantasy numbers down there. Sometimes there's going to be some disappointment when that guy goes to a different offense. I think we'll see a better Austin Hooper this year. I think him and Baker kind of got on the same page last year. You know, let's not forget that Austin Hooper missed some time when he had to have his appendix removed. It was just hard with all the setup for Baker to get on the same page with him. But he also had a huge catch against Kansas City that if the Browns had come back and won that game, we'd still be talking about today. So I still think there's something there with Hooper. But, yeah, we need to see a better version of him this year for the money he makes and what the Browns brought him in to do.
The other thing I would say, and tell me if you agree, and if you don't agree, that's fine too. You can disagree. A tight end, more so than any other position with quarterbacks, kind of a feel. And remember, no preseason, didn't get to do any type of work in training camp. And there's a sense of, okay, this guy likes me to settle in here. And he and Baker Mayfield could never do that. They could never get the feel. And I think that's more important with a tight end and a quarterback than probably any other position in the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think Baker in general is really kind of a trust-based quarterback. We've seen how he's connected with Rashard Higgins and what he'll do with Jarvis Landry. He'll make throws to Jarvis Landry that I don't think he'll make to other receivers because he just trusts Jarvis. And he trusts Rashard to be in the right place at the right time. And him and Hooper never got that together. And, you know, Kevin Stefanski's offense is interesting. It uses a lot of tight ends. But those tight ends don't always put up huge numbers. And I think we need to keep that in mind as well. There's a lot of responsibilities in this offense. You've got to be able to block. You've got to be able to catch the football. You've got to be versatile if you're a tight end. And so I think we will see better Austin Hooper this year. I don't know if he's ever going to live up to that contract, but I do think another year with Baker, we're going to see a better version of him.
So CBS Sports' Cody Benjamin ranked the NFL backup quarterbacks. Number 1, Trey Lance. Number 2, Justin Fields. Those are rookies, so if you know what you're getting from them, probably more so than the coaching staff. Then you got Bridgewater and Jacoby Brissett. Case Keenum checks in at 5. Do you buy that?
It's high. I'm a little surprised to see him there. First of all, Denver should be starting Teddy Bridgewater, but that's another discussion. Case Keenum, we saw what he did with Minnesota and how he's able to lead them to the NFC Championship game. But that also comes with the caveat that Minnesota turned around and let him walk in free agency. Denver paid him and they traded him. So I think Case Keenum kind of is who he is. But as far as a backup quarterback goes, to know what you're getting, to know he can come in and run your offense, to know he can win you some games, that's really kind of all you can ask for out of your backup. Baker is a tough guy, and he very rarely leaves football games. So, I don't think we're going to have to worry about seeing Case Keenum. Baker plays through a lot. He had the ribs last year. He's had other issues throughout his career. He stays on the field, which I think is a big asset for a starting quarterback. I don't know if Case Keenum is number 5. I don't know that I would put him there, but I think Case Keenum is this kind of reliable backup you want to have.
Yeah, I would agree. You can win games with Case Keenum, and that's in the Browns situation where you're thinking playoffs and going deep in the playoffs. That's what you're looking for. Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take another time out. On the other side of the break, Anthony Walker, change in numbers. We'll take a look at that. Plus, we'll talk extensions. Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Who gets the first extension? Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. A My Social Security account allows you to access your earnings history and benefits information, request a replacement Social Security card, get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. Dan, this one's going to take a little getting used to. So everybody's able to wear pretty much any number they want. That means you can see linebackers wearing, say, the number 4, like Anthony Walker. And Walker tweeted this. So there is Anthony Walker, Browns' new middle linebacker. Looking a little like Nick Chubb as far as that running stance goes. And you see him when he looks to be 8 or 9 years old. Number 4 for the Raiders. Everybody wanted to play in the Raiders system as a kid. But I had no idea, Dan, that Anthony Walker was a big Derek Carr fan. Did you?
Yeah, who knew? No, that was a shocker. This is going to be a little weird. When I walked out there on that Thursday of minicamp practice, I think it was, when he made the switch and he was wearing number 4, I don't know. I was torn by it. I don't want to be too like old man yelling at clouds here and say, oh, he should be wearing a number in the 50s. But I think here in Cleveland, that number 4 is just always tied to a kicker, mostly Phil Dawson. So it's hard to see a middle linebacker wearing that number, I think.
Can you imagine, quarterbacks seeing a number 4 coming at him and not registering, wait a minute, that's the middle linebacker. I need to get out of here.
Yeah, what's their backup quarterback doing on the field right now? You got him, you got Owusu Koromoa wearing number 28. And I think we're only going to see this get more and more common as, I think players have to buy the stocks of their jerseys to change numbers. So as we see more players change teams, we might see this happen more and more. I know Jalen Ramsey's wearing number 5 now at corner. So we're just going to have to get used to this new world, I guess.
Yeah, but again, a number 4 from middle linebacker, it's hard to take. So here's one for you. Someone made a $700 bet that the Browns will have the worst record in the NFL. So it's a $700 bet. If it pays off, it's $175,000. So your reaction to that one?
I mean, you should have just taken that $700 and bought, 700 lottery tickets or something, because you'd have a better chance of that. I don't see a single scenario where the Browns end up with the worst record in the NFL. I'm sure somebody could think up something, but with the talent on this football team, I mean, we even just talked about Case Keenum. If he's the quarterback, they'll be fine. They'll win, even in a bad year, they'd win 6 or 7 games. There's just too much talent on this football team. There's too many other bad football teams out there. I mean, the Texans are a mess. There's other teams, even some others on the Browns schedule that are not very good. I think this person is taking $700 and lighting it on fire here, which is a strange thing to say about, the Cleveland Browns, but that just shows how far they've come.
Well, it could be 7 years worth of a subscription to the Browns Insider Club as well. Think about it. You get 7 years of information from the folks that cover it for cleveland.com. See, I can come up with creative ways to spend $700. 7 years.
Yeah, I'm saying go buy lottery tickets, and you're advertising our Football Insider. You're doing my job for me, so there you go.
All right, let's change our focus just a little bit. So Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. So you got 3 of those guys from that draft class, quarterbacks, all due for their extensions. Who do you think gets done first?
Man, this is a tough one. Now, Lamar's doing his without an agent, which is really interesting. So I think that one might take a little bit longer. I'm going to say Josh Allen gets done first. I think Baker is always kind of there under the surface to maybe get done. Maybe it gets pushed back. But I think Josh Allen, it wouldn't surprise me if he got done maybe this summer before they go to training camp. And then we might see Baker or Lamar get done right before the season starts. I was curious. I went back and looked, and it does happen where like Deshaun Watson signed his in September. Jared Goff's was in September right before the season. A lot of times though, it's usually either in July or like right before that season starts when that extension gets done. With Baker, who knows? It could go into the season. It could go into next offseason. They'll extend him eventually. But I'm going to guess that Josh Allen ends up going first.
Is it do you think it's going to be a matter of, one moves the next contract up or that's usually a sign that the agent is kind of manipulating the terms of the contract. The agent always wants, $1 more than the next. See Francisco Lindor's contract after Tatis signed it. But do you see that, or do you think these 3 will kind of get done, their own way?
I don't think they could get done in a vacuum. I think the 3 kind of affect each other. And we saw this a few years ago with quarterbacks, whether it was rookie extensions or just, veterans getting extensions. Every next guy up was getting a little more money than the last. And so it is sort of 3 guys kind of staring at each other, waiting for the first one to blink. Baker's, though, is so interesting because, Lamar's got an MVP. Josh Allen was, fantastic last year. And Baker, as good as he was towards the last half of last season, he hasn't quite put together that full season yet. He doesn't have those accolades that those other guys have. So, I'm not sure how that's going to ultimately play out, but I do think it's going to be somebody's going to sign first. The next guy's going to try and beat him. And then honestly, if Baker just waits till next offseason, he might really be able to cash in because I think he's due for a really big season this year in 2021.
You know, the other thing is, it occurs to me, it's not really Andrew Berry's style to follow the lead of somebody else. He's going to set a value that he thinks he's going to end up paying, and then he's going to go out and try to get it done. That's kind of what we've seen from him.
Yeah, I think that's how he views it, sort of that New England Patriots way of doing business. But quarterback is always a little bit different. You know, it's not even like the Denzel Ward contract or the Myles Garrett contract when Myles was the highest paid defensive player last year for a couple of weeks before Bosa signed his extension. Quarterback is just different. And you're ultimately going to pay that. If you think you have the franchise guy, you're ultimately going to pay that market price, even if it's a little higher than you're comfortable with going, because you've got to think to yourself, what's my alternative? You know, this is my guy. This is our franchise quarterback. Are we just going to let him walk in free agency? Are we going to franchise him like the Washington team did with Kirk Cousins? Ultimately, you kind of have to bite the bullet a little bit with the quarterback and just pay him.
So having said that, let's look at the Browns have a number of guys that are on one-year deals and a number of guys that are due extensions. You've got Chubb, you've got Ward, you've got Baker, you've got Teller. You really have Anthony Walker, who you know, the middle linebacker that they brought in. Do you think any of those get done before training camp, and if so, who?
I think we'll see at least one get done before camp. And the two I would pick out would be either Chubb or Denzel Ward. I think Denzel Ward's contract is really easy. Now, that's easy for me to say because I'm sitting here talking about it. I'm not an agent. I'm not a GM. But I think it's a really easy contract. It's the question of, do you want to pay him 5 years, somewhere between $90 and $100 million, or $85 and $100 million? I think the answer to that question is yes. I think that's an easy deal to get done. Chubb's a little more complicated because you're going to want to give yourself some outs after a couple years because it is a running back. You know, paying a running back is sort of like buying a used car. You know it's not going to appreciate in value as you go along. So I think with Chubb, you want to give yourself some flexibility in maybe the final 2 years of the deal. But, you know, I think Chubb wants to be here. So I think you can get something done with him. If I had to place a bet on one of them getting done, I'd say Denzel Ward.
The other thing I'll ask you, do you think the Browns are interested in extending Anthony Walker? That's a guy who, by all accounts, has kind of come in. He gives them a little bit of a veteran presence at that, but not an old veteran presence, you know, still an ascending towards his prime of his career.
Yeah, I think he's only 25 years old. And so this is a really nice young piece that I think the Browns can have in the middle. I don't think they'll do anything with him right now. I mean, they just signed him in this offseason, but I think he can play himself into a new contract. If he shows that he can be a playmaker in the middle of that defense and be the leader and the quarterback of this defense, which is what they're bringing him in to do, then I don't think this will be a BJ Goodson situation where they use him for a year and let him walk. I think this is a guy that can prove himself valuable. And it might come down to Jacob Phillips too. You know, he's been getting a lot of work at Mike linebacker. If they think he can take over that role long-term, maybe they go that direction. But if Anthony Walker proves to be, you know, indispensable this year, it wouldn't surprise me if the Browns brought him back on some sort of reasonable contract after this season.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for The Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, Dan, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime.
All right, Dan Labbe, make sure you read them in the pages of The Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Step aside, we're going to take a quick time out so we shift our focus on the other side of the break. Kevin Kleps, sports business reporter for Crain's Cleveland Business, will join us. We'll talk about Ohio and state sports wagering, as well as the Bally Sports App. The way you consume live sports may be changing. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you might be asking yourself, should I get it? And if I do, will I be able to go about life without putting my family at risk? You've got questions, and that's normal. The fact is, the vaccines are safe and effective. They're going to save lives. To get the latest on the COVID-19 vaccines, visit getvaccineanswers.org. Because getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue to talk about sports and changing our focus just a little bit. This is going to be about how we consume sports, especially live sports. Let's welcome in Kevin Kleps, sports business reporter for Crain's Cleveland Business. Kevin, a couple days ago, news broke about the Bally Sports App. It's some of the details have come out. What can consumers expect from this? Is this the wave of the future? Is this where live sports is headed?
In a lot of ways it is, Dave. They're talking about a direct-to-consumer app where it'll be a Netflix type of service where you can get the regional sports networks. You can get Bally Sports Ohio and Bally Sports Great Lakes for a monthly charge and just stream it directly onto your smart TV or onto your phone or your laptop or whatever. And I mean, yeah, it's the way it's going. It just, there's some issues with it. And they're talking about it being ready for the 2022 Major League Baseball season, which seems kind of optimistic right now.
The other thing that came out was a price point of around $22, $23 a month. That seems a little higher than I thought it would be. Did that surprise you as well?
Yeah, it definitely surprised me. I was looking at it. I mean, when you think about everything you get for Netflix for $15 a month, and then Disney Plus is half the price of Netflix. It just, yeah, that surprised me. You're counting on the hardcore dedicated fans of Major League Baseball and the NBA, but getting them to pay that much per month seems pretty optimistic, to be honest.
And you know, you had touched on the timeline. They're trying to ramp this up by, call it March or April of next year when baseball begins. There's a lot of things that have to go in motion, and we kind of had discussed that a little bit yesterday. There's a lot of loose ends to tie up if they want to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to all this. I mean, you have to negotiate with the leagues. You have to talk to Major League Baseball. You have to get the okay on their end. You have to get the okay from the NBA and the NHL, because they have those three leagues. The Sinclair brands have, I think it's 42 teams. So that's a lot of, they cover a heavy market there. So you have to get the okay from the three leagues. And then you have to get into how it works with, they already have agreements with AT&T for DirecTV and AT&T services. They have agreements with other cable operators like Spectrum. So how that works when people are already getting it on their pay TV service, I'm assuming that doesn't change, because they already have rights negotiated with Sinclair for these networks. So that, I don't know how that's all going to work either. When you have a ton of people in Northeast Ohio on Spectrum and AT&T and DirecTV who already have the channel. So that dwindles down the market for the direct-to-consumer offering quite a bit. I guess it's possible that at some point Sinclair is just going to expect that everyone's going to be on there and they stop offering it on cable and satellite, but I don't know how realistic that would be.
Now, Sinclair is the rights holder. Bally's has kind of bought naming rights, and this all revolves around legalized sports wagering, which it looks like is coming. It's already in a few states. It could be coming to Ohio. How big of a deal and a game changer is legalized sports wagering in this particular instance for a Bally's, direct-to-consumer app?
Yeah, Sinclair is counting on it heavily. They struck that deal with Bally's for the naming rights. I think it was $85 million over 10 years. And if you look at what a couple other regional sports networks were sports betting is legal, I mean, they're going to incorporate it heavily into the broadcast. Sinclair's CEO has been very outspoken about how sports betting is the wave of the future, and it's going to be a big part of Sinclair's telecast. So they're counting on it. Whether it's going to be an alternate channel where you're going to have a more sports betting heavy channel on one end, and then a standard broadcast that we're accustomed to on another channel, that's all kind of to be determined. But I'm guessing that's the way it's going to be. But yeah, it's going to be a heavy part of it. They're going to be counting on people once it's legalized in enough states where Sinclair operates these regional sports networks, that you can go on this app or on the streaming service, and you can check out the broadcast, and then there's going to be live betting. And if you have the Bally app, you could just do it directly on the app. So yeah, they're counting on this being a big part of it. And it seems crazy now with the way the leagues were so opposed to gambling a decade ago, but now it's the wave of the future. And in some ways it's the wave, I mean, it's the current wave, because there are areas where this is operating full force and where it's already incorporated into some broadcasts, I think, in the DC area.
So the next question is, and I know you've written on this, Ohio is one of those states that's working towards getting sports wagering legalized. Take us through where that sits. Is there a concerted move forward, or is it kind of stuck in neutral the way it's been for a couple of years?
It was stuck in neutral for a couple of years. And it looked at one point like it was going to get passed in 2019, and then the legislators who were sponsoring that bill, by the end of last year, most of them got voted out or were term limited. So they kind of started over this year. And now there's been a pretty heavy push for it. The Senate passed the sports betting bill last week, and now it's going to be over to the House to decide whether they like it or how many changes they want to make. The goal was to have it done by the end of the month, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen, just because of the way it is now. There's been so many moving parts. They originally introduced it, and then there were a ton of changes the very next day. And then when they introduced, then the bill that passed the Ohio Senate last week was heavily changed from the previous version. So I think once the House gets its hands on it pretty soon here, there's going to be some more changes that are pushed. But it does seem like this is actually going to go through this year, whereas I wouldn't have said that last year. It seems like this year it is going to happen. I don't know about this whole thing where it's going to be pushed or where it's going to be okayed by the end of June or early July. That might be optimistic, but it does seem like it's going to happen this year.
If you were guessing, is there a more realistic timeline when you think it could end up happening? Or I mean, if I'm running one of those apps or one of those casinos, I want sports wagering by the time NFL hits. Is that something that you think is possible by September, or is that being realistic? Or is that being unbelievably optimistic?
That I would go with the latter on that. I guess there's a small chance of that, but with all these moving parts and with the changes that have already been made, and then when you think about once this passes, how long it takes to implement everything, where you have to mix in all the different the brick and mortar sports books obviously aren't going to be ready, but how they mix in the live online betting and all that, and who has control of it and who partners with who. Because if you have the Indians and Cavs and Browns involved, they're going to want to have their own partners on this. So it's going to be, whether it's FanDuel, DraftKings, or whoever, there's just so many different things that have to be lined up before the market goes full force on day one. So I would think we're looking at 2022 for that, but who knows? I mean, it depends on how badly they want to get this thing done.
And the last thing before I let you go, and you pointed this out to me, I completely forgot about it. Cavs' rights deal is up, which further complicates the whole Sinclair Bally app. Do you think that gets done quickly? Does it get done as a short term so they can see what all the revenue generated by potential sports wagering is? Is that those are all things that have to factor into a rights deal now, correct?
Yeah, it would have to. It's going to be interesting to see how creative the Cavs want to get with this, whether they want to do the standard deal with these types of rights agreements is a pretty long-term deal where you're talking 10, 15 years for 50, 60, 70 million, 80 million, depending on how big the team is and how big the market is each year. And the Indians deal has another, I think, 6 years on it, and they're getting about 50 million a year. I don't know the Cavs deal that just ran out was 35 to 38 million a year. and it lasted for quite a while. So it depends on how creative the Cavs want to get. They could do a short-term deal to see how it works with all these different moving parts and the sports betting and everything else, or they could just do the standard long-term agreement. My guess is they would do the long-term agreement as long as it's lucrative enough. And more of these deals, you see the teams get a minority stake in the network. And I would think that the Cavs would be pushing for that too. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works itself out here in the next couple of months. But I don't see the Cavs going anywhere because they're just too few options right now as far as where they could go. I guess you'd never put anything past Dan Gilbert. Maybe they could want to do their own regional sports network at some point, but just to get that done by tip-off of the 2021-2022 NBA season, I don't think that wouldn't seem possible.
Kevin Kleps, sports business reporter for Crain's Cleveland Business. Kevin, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave.
All right. Again, Kevin Kleps, you can read him in Crain's Cleveland Business. He is the sports business reporter. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We're going to dive into the NCAA. The Supreme Court had a decision against them. Pete Carfagna, a visiting professor for sports law at Harvard Law, will join us. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to try-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens? Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We shift our attention again. We're going to take a look at the Supreme Court ruling that went against the NCAA as far as limiting education-based compensation to student athletes. 9-0. Supreme Court ruled against the NCAA. Let's welcome in Pete Carfagna. He is a visiting professor in charge of sports law at Harvard Law. Peter, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. What does this mean to the NCAA when you look at this ruling that came down yesterday?
Yeah, no, it means a lot. It means, the foundations perhaps are cracking a little bit, one little, bit at a time, like a Jenga. You pull out a piece and the whole thing could come tumbling down, but it's a step along the way to amateurism, the whole model being threatened, especially through the concurring opinion by Justice Kavanaugh, where he basically calls the NCAA an illegal cartel. That's probably the most damning part of it. However, it is limited in scope for now, David.
If you're the legal counsel to the NCAA and you see that, what do you make of it? What are you telling the people who you are advising at that point?
You better open up name, image, likeness real quick. It seemed to be an illegal restraint of trade of a Trevor Lawrence or somebody who could monetize his brand when he was, or Zion Williamson when he was at Duke, or Trevor Lawrence, was the best quarterback in the country. He was unable to make money off of his brand. And I think that's going to be the next big debate coming out of this case is the NCAA is going to have to leave a lot of room to allow student athletes to monetize their brand while they're still playing in college. I think that's the next big fight you'll see.
Is it a case where this could, completely change the structure? Because when you look at a Trevor Lawrence and an Ohio State or an Alabama or a Clemson, it's one thing. When you're looking at a Cleveland State or a Kent State or a smaller quote-unquote mid-major, completely different structure as far as economics go.
It's the Power 5 conferences that are ruling the roast here, Dave. They really are. They're driving the train, and the NCAA is trying to stay on the train because they could get just taken off the train altogether. I mean, the Power 5 could just say, we're going to go have some fun by ourselves pretty soon here if you guys don't play along, especially on name, image, likeness. But yeah, it is a very different world. We love Cleveland State. We love the Vikings. A season ticket holder forever. Scott Garrett, the AD, is a great guy, and they have a great program. But even there, to allow those student athletes to monetize their brand while they're playing for the Vikings, that would be a good thing. That would be a good inducement for the head coach to be able to offer to kids on local whatever sorts of branding they might be able to do, and on social media. That would be a good thing for Cleveland State too.
Again, I know the legal ramifications aren't concerned about it. How do you keep the crazed boosters from ruling it and turning it into something other than name, image, and likeness, and doing the illegal recruiting kind of things?
There's 6 states that have passed laws already. Ohio's got one in process. There's a bunch of federal initiatives. You have to put some guardrails in place for sure, David. I mean, you've got to have guardrails where there's almost a clearinghouse to say this isn't, Phil Knight at Oregon buying the next great quarterback or whatever it might be through a Nike sponsorship. So guardrails, clearinghouses, all that sort of thing. But the rich will get richer, and I'm afraid to say it becomes a nuclear arms race for the next Zion Williamson to decide what college basketball team he might play for, because you might even talk about media market. You might say this is going to favor the LA schools because there's more media, social media, and other opportunities for marketing a brand in the bigger markets like in Miami or in New York or in LA. So in that respect, I think those schools that are already at the top of the heap will do whatever they can on NIL and also on education-related benefits to maximize their recruiting advantages. And Ohio State will not be caught. Gene Smith is a really smart guy. They'll be right there. They'll be right there in the mix.
Is it fair to say, no matter what happens, change is coming? The NCAA as it exists in this form and fashion, that's not going to last much longer.
Very well said. Like I said, the foundation, the pieces of the foundation are coming down sort of brick by brick. They're holding on for dear life. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Every time there's a lawsuit, they seem to lose. I mean, they're the ones who brought this on themselves. They're the ones who brought this appeal to the Supreme Court. I mean, they would have been left, if they had left well enough alone and just let the Ninth Circuit and the federal district court's decision stand, we wouldn't be talking today. But Supreme Court really, was wham with the right hand in many respects. It's like, we just don't like this model, and we think it's got to change. That's the dicta. The holding is limited to education-related benefits. You cannot stop a school from providing all sorts, anything related to education. You the NCAA, cannot stop that. Okay, but then that runs wild because schools like let's just pick Alabama can call almost anything they want an education-related benefit to lure the next great quarterback to come to Alabama.
All right, let's shift our attention quickly. You are a guy that owns part of the Captains. What's going on with the Captains? High A, they are now just a game out of first place in their division. Tell us about some of the good things that are coming up with High A baseball here in Northeast Ohio with the Lake County Captains.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I mean, we're home for the holiday. We're home for the 4th. We've got 3 finally cleared to do fireworks, and we got a Shane Bieber bobblehead coming up. So it's fireworks, bobbleheads, all hands on deck. Thanks for prompting me that way. We're really having great crowds now that the restrictions have been lifted, and people are coming out and just really enjoying themselves. And the team has been performing tremendously. Best home record we've had in a long, long time. A lot of good prospects on their way to going to play for the Indians in the not too distant future. So Shane Bieber bobblehead and fireworks, those are probably the 2 things I would emphasize.
All right, Peter Carfagna, as always, appreciate the insights. I'm sure as this legal thing keeps going on, we'll check in with you, and we will also check in with you again about the Lake County Captains. Peter, thanks for the time and the insight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Anytime. Always a pleasure. Good luck to you.
All right. Peter Carfagna, owner of the Lake County Captains, as well as visiting sports law professor at Harvard Law. That'll do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. We will see you again tomorrow. Scott Petrak, scheduled guest Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Have a great night, everybody. We will see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock.